That multi-million-dollar verdict in a California death case. Young woman's body was found at her boyfriend's mansion. Police called it a suicide, but a jury has now concluded that the boyfriend's brother was responsible for her death. Our senior legal analyst, Sunny Hassan, is here with the latest on the case. Good morning, Sunny.
Good morning, George. This is a case that I covered extensively for 2020 and Nightline, and it's a case that really just captured a nation and a family who insisted on seeking justice for their sister.
I want to thank the jury for spending so many weeks to get justice for Rebecca.
A bombshell verdict in the civil trial centered on the mysterious death of 32-year-old Rebecca Zahau, the young woman found hanging in the sprawling beachside mansion of her pharmaceutical tycoon boyfriend, Adam Shaknai.
Was Rebecca Zahau harmed before her death by Adam Zahau's conduct? The answer is yes.
A jury finding this man, her boyfriend's brother Adam Shaknai, responsible for her death, awarding her family $5 million in damages.
Hopefully people will know that she didn't commit suicide.
Adam Shaknai, a tugboat captain from Tennessee, was visiting his brother at the time of Rebecca's death because of another tragic mystery which occurred inside the beachside mansion. His brother's 6-year-old son, Max, plunged over a second-floor railing and was hospitalized. He later died. Rebecca was the only adult home at the time. Days later, Adam found Rebecca's lifeless body bound and gagged. He cut her down and called 911.
Emergency, what are you reporting?
Yeah, I got a girl hung herself.
Okay,
yeah.
Is she still alive?
I don't think so.
The case was eventually ruled a suicide, but Rebecca's family never buying it, suing Adam Shaknai in civil court. Adam's brother Jonah defending his innocence in an exclusive interview with ABC News.
He wakes up and his life has changed forever, not because of anything he did, but just because of where he was.
And we're now joined by Sunny and ABC News Chief Legal Analyst Dan Abrams. Surprised by the verdict?
Not surprised. Remember, this is a civil case, so the burden is lower. You have a 9-3 decision from the jury. In a criminal case, that would be a hung jury. In this kind of civil case, you get yourself a verdict. Why did it happen? I think because in the end, if you don't believe that this was a suicide,
which is hard to believe,
yes. He becomes the key person to look at. And so even if you say, well, maybe there's not enough to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, that is the difference right there between civil and criminal.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the civil standard, of course, is more likely than not. It's just a preponderance of the evidence. It's just a mere tipping of the scale. But this case, because I've covered it so closely, has always struck me as odd. I've interviewed so many experts. I've interviewed the family members, and everyone agrees. When have you ever heard of a woman stripping naked and tying herself behind her back with nautical knots and throwing herself off of a balcony? It just never made sense.
So the key question becomes, from a sort of criminal investigative standpoint, will the coroner's office reevaluate its finding? Do you think, is that possible?
You know, I do think it's possible. The sheriff's department has come out and basically said we are willing to look at new evidence. We're willing to meet with this family again. There isn't necessarily new evidence, but they did have an independent examiner look at the body, and that person found that it probably wasn't suicide.
It does make you wonder how they got to suicide in the first place.
Right.
It has always been an odd conclusion.
Right.
It really has been.
And that will then determine whether or not he's liable for criminal charges this next time around.
Well, right. The question becomes if they can change the fundamental finding. I think that's what they have to do in order to move forward with any kind of criminal cases. They'd have to move forward and say, well, either it's uncertain what happened or we think it was a homicide. But the minute you say it's suicide, how can you charge anybody in connection with that? Your coroner saying it's a suicide. If it's a suicide, that means that there wasn't someone who, quote unquote, did it.
Right. Well, there were 4 contusions found on her head. The coroner found that she must have sustained those injuries when she jumped off of the balcony. The independent examiner said, no, this happened before she was thrown over the balcony. And so I think that's a key distinction.
Certainly seems
here.
like grounds to look at it again. Yeah. As for this civil case itself, is it vulnerable on appeal or not really?
Absolutely. All civil verdicts are very vulnerable on appeal. I mean, the first thing that'll happen is you'll either try and get the verdict thrown out for some reason or another, the amount reduced, et cetera. But, you know, look, I think, and look, Sunny's talked to this family a lot more than I have, but I would think for them it's less about the dollars and more about the symbolism of saying someone's going to be held accountable here.
They've always wanted justice for Rebecca. Her sister Mary definitely feels that Adam is the person that killed her sister. And I think this is just a small step. What they really want is the Sheriff's Department to open up the investigation, re-examine this case, and find that this was a homicide.
And I don't know if that's going to happen. I mean, that's still a long shot.
It's a key one. And you say that when the verdict came in, no reaction?
No reaction from Adam Shaknai, and I thought that was odd as well.
Interesting story. Thanks, guys. Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.